Hey, and welcome back to Toast. So, today we are in the Balkans still. I'm going to talk about Montenegro. For those of you who have never been or heard of Montenegro, it is this tiny little country in the Balkan region, which is like next to the Adriatic Sea, close to all of those beautiful countries like Croatia, like I was talking about in the last episode. So, Montenegro, I have a lot to say, and I'm going to try to fit it all into one small episode. The reason I want to talk about Montenegro in one episode is even though I did a lot of things, I really only visited one place, which is Kotor. To start off, Kotor is an amazing, super picturesque city. There's a castle on the top of the hill that's lit up at night that you can hike in 45 minutes or 2 hours if you take the longer route that goes around. You'll see a lot of goats and cows and things like that. There's, again, like Croatia, like I was saying in the last two episodes, a city center or a historical city center where there's no cars, so just pedestrians. And one of the coolest things about Kotor, in that city center, like they have this cat museum, and it's not for no reason that they have that cat museum. It's because in Kotor, contrary to most of the rest of the Balkans and also most of the developing countries in the world, they tend to have a lot of stray dogs. Whereas in Kotor, they don't have pretty much any stray dogs, at least when I was there in 2017. And they just had a lot of stray cats, so they were known as the city of stray cats. And before you start making any judgments, generally lower socioeconomic societies or developing countries, in another word, tend to treat these stray animals a little bit better than we do because they are used to poverty. They're used to sharing and giving. So these stray animals generally don't go unfed or hungry. There was tons of food all over the place in Kotor for these cats, and they were very cute. They'd let you pet them, and they weren't aggressive or anything. And they were generally accounted for and looked after. A lot of tags, things like that. Maybe I'll get into that if I touch on Bulgaria, which has the most stray dogs in one city, which is its capital, Sofia. Nonetheless, getting to Montenegro, one of the most amazing things is, when you're traveling, you always kind of meet a lot of people and you tend to stay where they stay, either because you picked each other up or because you guys are just, meeting up at a new location. So one of you chooses on a hostel or a location and you each went your own way for a few days or a week or something. And then you just like re-liaison up there. So what happened when I was going to Kotor is, I was re-meeting up with this person that I was traveling with a few weeks earlier in, I think it was Macedonia in Ohrid. And we'll talk about Ohrid next time, let's say. It won't be in this season of the episodes in the Balkans. I'll touch it on its own because I think I've touched enough about those types of stories recently. So in Kotor, I was meeting up with a friend, and it ended up that we were going to one of the best hostels I've ever been to in my life. And I don't say that about every or many hostels because truly it was amazing. It was situated right in the dead center of the old historical center, which is really what you want to be in, middle of thrift shops. And really what it is, it's like a cave. You need to like go into this like building that was kind of like chiseled out of stone and then maybe like reassembled the stone so that it just looked a little bit nicer, but you could tell that it was like built into, the solid rock that was the foundation of the city. An amazing hostel, not just because of its location and the actual sheer beauty of being in, 600 or 700-year-old buildings, but also because what I like to call the hostel roulette. And any of you guys who are familiar with roulette, you know that it's gambling, right? And that's really what it is sometimes. When you go to a hostel, you're gambling. You don't know who's going to be there. You don't know what the vibe's going to be. And it could be very different from this week to next week, right? Because depending who's there this week or how the vibe is feeling, if there's a big party vibe or something like that, and what you want, because maybe you don't want a party vibe, maybe you do want a party vibe, maybe you want a traveling vibe. And at the end of the day, what I just felt like I connected so much with the people at that hostel was that from the moment that I got there, I was just kind of looking for my friend. And instead, I met this guy who spoke more languages than me, which is really random, but he spoke 8 languages fluently. I spoke to him in Italian, Spanish, French, and English, and he was able to, outdo me in Chinese, Russian, and a few other ones, Serbo-Croatian for one, because that's where we were. But it was really cool because essentially we ended up meeting up, me and that girl, I think her name was Gabrielle, and then she showed up with another friend, and then we ended up just like kind of staying in the hostel. And that hostel was just such a great place because we just all created this community. We became one solid entity, one group, and we were maybe 20 people in this, like, call it party room or this like games room. So we just started playing drinking games, and we kept going and buying more beer, and we continued it. And dinner was provided if you gave them another, like, I think, €3 or something, really really cheap, and good quality food and everything. You didn't need to leave. And so we really created like an amazing community. And now I'll never forget those moments because I created the Slav squat, which is already a thing, but we call it the Mother Teresa squat. So we were squatting down with our hands in a prayer position because Mother Teresa is one of those controversial topics in the Balkans, because they all claim that she's, from their country and not the neighboring countries, because they all have a lot of pride, which is, I think, a good thing. But Montenegrins don't have that pride. They're known to be the relaxed and pretty lazy guys of the bunch. With this group, what was really cool is that, we ended up doing, like, call it an excursion together. We all went to this next town close to Kotor called Perast, where they have like churches and two little islands, and one of them's a church and one of them's just an old building in the middle of like this big huge Bay of Kotor. And the Bay of Kotor is great because you could see it from the top of the castle for everybody who goes and hikes it, and you could pretty much see Perast and these beautiful things. And we just kind of had this great chemistry with us that brought us there together. And we made some friends with people who were on the cruise ships and taking the buses with us, and we took pictures of all of us squatting together, and it was really really cool. And I really can't emphasize how much fun it is to go to a hostel and just feel like you won roulette, which is the hostel roulette. And so we just, all of us collectively decided, night after night or morning after morning, when you pretty much need to check out, we were just like, okay, well, one more night. And it was really good because it wasn't one of those hostels that broke the bank. It was €5 per night. Now, that's not very expensive. That's about $7, American or Canadian, let's say, at the time of speaking. And then really what you ended up getting was the best deal ever, because after 4 nights, I think they gave you the 5th for free. So we all just ended up extending to that 4th night, and then, well, fuck it, we're staying for the 5th, right? It was really nice because actually at some point, a lot of people decided that, that we were going to do different things, kind of like splitting the group into 2 groups, but we were going to meet back to party and drink and socialize and just create, memories. And we just brought back like different playlists from different centuries. And I ended up going with this one Korean guy that I was speaking a little bit of Korean to, and he went with a couch surfer. And not because he was going to couch surf at that guy's place, but because the couch surfer just kind of wanted to show him around. So he picked us up at the hostel, on foot, and then he brought us to his car, and he drove us to the next town over on the other side. So not where Perast is, but on the other side of the bay, which is where they created the port of Montenegro. The only port in Montenegro and one of the only ports in the entire Balkan region, which is, a huge accomplishment for such a small country. And that small town, which is called Tivat, was just such a world of difference. Like, you just drove through a tunnel from Kotor, this old, beautiful medieval town with a castle on the hill overlooking the water, everything that you could really imagine from like a Game of Thrones type of scene. And then you go through this tunnel and you end up in this other place, and it just felt so incredibly like Turkish or Arabic. It just felt like the entire architecture changed. It was ultra modern. There were yachts all over the place. Everything was very, very fake and like maybe superficial because it was just so wealthy, which is, a consequence of them having that port. Like, a port creates a yacht club and a place for many people, especially the rich Europeans, to, go through the Adriatic Sea, which is where Montenegro and all of the other Balkan countries are. So they can go around Italy, Croatia, all of these places, and then they have a place where they can stop and touch land and enjoy and go to Kotor for one, or just enjoy Tivat and the upper, life, high quality life, excuse me, that they live there, which is very different, from the rest of Montenegro and all of the Balkans, for that matter. But it was really cool because I got to see what it's like, in both extremes, which is, one is more of like the tourist haven, like, hey, what kind of excursions do you want to do? Let's go hiking for a few days. Let's go see some churches on islands and things like that, and make the best like hostel friends ever, and go to a post office and realize that it was built in communism, Yugoslavia. And it was just really cool to be able to see like the most ultra capitalistic side a mere like 5 kilometers away, and just see how that like affects us seeing it. Me and the Korean guy were just in awe. We had no idea what we were going to see. We had no idea that we were going to see such like an upscale place, and just like suits and high heels and dresses were everywhere, and it was just so wildly different from Couture, where you just have like a bunch of backpackers with long hair that they probably haven't washed in weeks. It was just so incredibly different that Couture and Montenegro, through just that city and those, Perast and Tivat that I also visited nearby, really had like a long lasting impact on me, because I still think of it as one of my favorite cities and experiences in Europe, just because it's just so rare to hit that hostel roulette and also have a lot of sense of community with the people who were there. We became friends with a lot of people who were around the hostel, business owners around the hostel that sold, whether it was beer or sandwiches and things like that. So we already felt like we were joining the community, and people were offering us to stay, like, oh, you could volunteer at the hostel, we'll let you stay for free, we'll feed you, blah, blah, blah. And it just felt so welcoming. And it's kind of hard to say this because I don't want to attack anybody, but in the Balkans, they are a little bit colder of a people. As much as they're interested and curious to see Westerners, they're also like, oh, look at these guys just, exploiting and looking at the beauty of our country, not knowing the pain that we went through. Montenegrins didn't really have that, maybe because they're known to be the lazy and chilled out ones, but it was just, it was a cool change of pace. And from Montenegro, I ended up traveling with this girl named Michaela, and we went to Bosnia together after, and that was, and again, one of like the best places in the Balkans, and I think actually my favorite place in the Balkans is Bosnia, and I'm going to talk about that in another episode. But I already told you about Mostar and Bata's tour, and just putting into perspective what it looks like to perceive the world from a Bosnian eye, one of those crossroads of East and West, which is really what all of the Balkans are. So if you enjoyed this, hit that subscribe, share it, whatever it is. I'm going to continue talking about the Balkans for the next few episodes. So stay tuned if this is one of the regions of the world that interests you. Toast out.